Oh, yeah, I've got three cameras. I got that camera.
Go. So Mel,
Yes.
now
Hi,
I've
Ann.
known you for a very long time. We haven't
Oh, yeah.
always had contact during this time, but I've still known you for a long time, and
Absolutely.
uh, I am wondering, and ever since I've known you, you've been involved with puzzles.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way, some shape or form, you have been working with puzzles.
Unless you knew me before I was 10 years old, you probably didn't. That's true because I started my fascination around 10 years of age with puzzles. So,
Well,
and I'm almost 80 now, so I've been doing it for 70 years.
well, at least since the 70s, which is when
Yeah.
we met, early 70s or mid 70s, and you were working with puzzles even then. So
Yep.
you have the stage. So start this latest puzzle phase is fascinating, where
Okay.
you put puzzles together from different puzzles that I find just, and the last one you did was amazingly beautiful. So go ahead and
Um,
start and tell us all about it.
Okay, well, I'll give you a little background, but listen, and this is a conversation. It's your program. Ask me what you want, and I'll tell. And you won't be able to shut me up. But I'm happy to talk about where it started. So I'm going to move to that other camera and tell you from over there. So when I was 10 years old, I had a set of jigsaw puzzles that I got from my cousin Bruce. Hmm. Bruce was, a couple years older than me, and this was in 1953. I would 10 years old. These would have been World War II jigsaw puzzles that he'd outgrown. He was probably in high school at the time, and I was, in third grade or fourth grade or something like that. And they were World War II airplanes puzzles, and there was a set of them, and the set of them had planes like flying in this direction and this direction, and they were uh, smoke, rat-a-tat, machine gun fire and smoke and things like that against blue backgrounds. And I found that I just noticed that the puzzles all had the same shape pieces, and so I could take a piece from one puzzle and I could move it to the other puzzle, and I could make these midair crashes. And that little 10-year-old terrorist grew up to be an artist. And that's it was very memorable. There's a fact about our brains, and that is we have to remember something that's bloody or a crash or extremely beautiful or whatever. It has to be almost it almost has to be orgiastic for us to put it into our memory, and you can read. But once you have that image, you retain it for a long time. And it wasn't until I didn't do any more of those kind of crash ups, smash ups, till about 10 years later when I was in college, and I was coming up with some ideas. It was the time of pop art when everybody was, using what they call in American studies, material culture, things from advertising, things from games and other things like that. And artists were making projects that involve popular media. And so I remembered back to those puzzles. I said, well, I wonder, do they still make puzzles with the same stamp? So I bought a few cheap puzzles, and I found out, yeah, that there are manufacturers, not everyone there, but there's some manufacturers that use the same stamp because the stamps are expensive to make. They're like cookie cutters, but they're very elaborate ways that you make a cookie cutter, and then have to use a huge amount of pressure to cut through cardboard and to stamp them out. But if you use the same stamp, then the pieces should move to another puzzle, even if you put a different picture underneath the stamp. So that was the basic premise. And then about every decade from 1960s to the present, I get a kind of period when I'm really sort of refascinated with jigsaw puzzles, and I'm on a roll right at the moment. COVID came along, and as you know, during COVID, there was a renaissance of interest in jigsaw puzzles. It happens every time there's an economic recession or a depression or something like that, because they're cheap entertainments. There's something you could do with the family. Everybody can kind of sit around and communicate. It takes up time. You can take it apart and do it over again. You can trade them. You can swap them. You can do different things with them. During the Depression, you could actually rent them at drugstores, fancy jigsaw puzzles that you couldn't afford, but they were numbered on the back, so that if you brought all the pieces back, then you could rent it for a little bit of money. And during this COVID lockdown, there was plenty of opportunities for people to work jigsaw puzzles. A lot of new companies came up. You know, they weren't really jigsaw puzzle companies. They were just companies that had interesting pictures that they could put on a jigsaw puzzle, send it a text message to China and have China stamp it out and send it back on a nice little package, and then they'd sell it. And they weren't really jigsaw puzzle companies. They didn't really care about the pattern of the jigsaw puzzle. They just were selling the image that was either hard to do or beautiful to do, just like those memorable images that those mnemonic devices that that we talk about in memory systems: bloody, gorgeous, beautiful, whatever. Memorable images you want to spend 6 to 8 hours, with that picture. Then, of course, advertisers got in the business, because they said, why can't we get them to spend 6 to 8 hours looking at a Coke bottle? Looking at something that we want them to, burn into their head. So they made these images and gave them to puzzle companies, and puzzle companies love that, because normally they have to pay for content. Well, the contents were being provided to them, but the imagery got less and less interesting.
And that was like going back to the pop art kind of thing, where
yes, it goes back very much to that pop art, early things. So anyway, I had different periods where I was very interested in jigsaws, and one was the period that you may remember. You might have still been in Iowa City, or been Iowa City at that time, in the 80s. I did a play about Michelangelo working jigsaw puzzles. And I did a lot of research. I got a grant from the university where I was teaching at the time. And I got a grant, and I say, I'm a cheapskate. I spent it on cheap things. I went to secondhand stores and I bought up tons of jigsaw puzzles. I'll switch to that camera. You can just see, okay, here I am. If I go to that camera, you can see I have a huge collection up there in the loft. All those boxes are filled with jigsaw puzzles that I bought for a nickel or a dime or a quarter at Goodwill, Salvation Army, places like that. And I started to learn about the history of jigsaw puzzles. Jigsaw puzzles weren't always stamped. No, something had to be invented before they could be stamped. What was that?
I don't know, some kind of machine.
Cardboard.
Cardboard.
Oh, like a particle board, a soft particle board that could be stamped instead of cutting it with a jigsaw. And originally, the first jigsaw puzzles in like 1760 or something like that were made with a marquetry saw. There was a map maker in London who had some excess inventory of maps, and he was trying to get rid of them. And he glued them to a piece of mahogany veneer, sort of thin wood, little plywood and he glued it, has a nice flat surface on. He would glue the map to that, and then he would take a saw and he'd saw around the countries of Europe, making them into a piece. Now we've all seen that in grade school. Maybe you had a puzzle of the United States, and each of the states was a different piece that fit into the picture. So that maker, his name was John Spilsbury. He made these as an educational toy for children. And for the next 100 years, they were kind of a prestige item, a toy for the elite, because they had to all be cut by hand. And then in 1865, just about the same time as the American Civil War, they invent this pressed particle board that they can stamp things with. And that's cheaper to make puzzles. And during the Depression, the people who were making, and during the COVID, I guess, the people who were making jigsaw puzzles were printers. They had large scale printing companies that made calendar art or advertising posters and things like that. They could throw anything under a stamp and make it into a jigsaw puzzle. So what with a lot of people being at home and not having a lot of money, they were making 2 million jigsaw puzzles a week and selling them at newsstands for like a quarter, a nickel, or whatever we buy. I bought them cheap in the 80s.
Okay, now what I'm interested in is the layering effect of your puzzles.
Okay, let's look at
Am
those.
I right or about that?
Yep. There's something. So recently, I've been working with this company. Let me show you on the overhead. I've been working with this company called 4 Point Puzzles. It's in Hamilton, Ontario. They're one of these COVID companies that kind of like blossomed and died like that. They just went out of business on February 4th. And I bought some of their puzzles because I saw them in a museum in Kansas City, the Nelson Atkins Museum. And I saw this set of puzzles. I'm going to show you what they look like. I thought they were kind of interesting because they were puzzles of paint by numbers. I had this one of the forest, and this one of the desert, and this one of the mountain. And I went to the museum gift shop, and they were expensive. I think they were like $25, $27 a piece with tax. And I said to myself, I'll bet like like those airplane puzzles, these have the same stamp. I mean, they're a suite of puzzles. Now, they may have several different assembly lines or cutting lines so that they have different stamps cutting, different pieces, but it's probably likely that they're all the same. And I just crossed my fingers and paid $50, $75 to get these puzzles. And sure enough, when I opened them up, they matched. So I could put them together correctly, and I could also take parts from the forest and move it to the desert, and then parts from the desert and move it to the mountain, and various mixtures of them. And I made one. Well, here's just an example of how I can do that. I'll show you again on my overhead camera. So those are the 3 pictures. They're kind of nice paint by number, typical. The fact that they have all the same kind of imagery, that the imagery is all, I made it so that I could mix them together. These are mixed together. So you see, I'm not sure if this, these are mixtures of the two puzzles, and I put them together that way. They kind of create all these abstract images. Whether you see, I don't know if you can see anything, but for instance, looks to me like there's a pair of sunglasses up there, and maybe a nose and shadow on a face, and maybe there's I see partial images and things. And if I see partial images, then I can move pieces from one to the other, and I can try to emphasize what my mind is trying to put together. But in order to do that, I need to, let's see if I can show you how I do it. Okay, let's just say I took a little group of pieces out of here. I'm just going to grab a few pieces out of here. I don't want to take too many. They're not. So that set of pieces that I took out of here, but there's another puzzle underneath there, so it looks like I didn't take any. That set of pieces also occurs. Let's see. It also occurs somewhere else. Let's see.
In the sky, maybe.
There. Let's see. Where am I? Okay. Here's the corner. Okay, this one is flipped around from this one. So these are at the top of this one, and I could find it here. Okay, there they are. Those are the same pictures. I can move those there. And there. And there. Whoops. And there. So now I can move that little group of pieces that I took out of this one. I can move it to this one, and I took these pieces out of that one and moved it to that one. I can keep doing that, but I can only do that in that specific location. I have to find, someplace there. And one of the things that I want to do is I want to kind of camouflage the connection between the two puzzles like this. So I want things to kind of bleed across this natural line. This is a straight line. I want people to ignore that. So I try to find ways to blend the picture, stretch it out over that gap so that people see the continuous picture and not the break in the picture.
And then
Now,
is there any way you can keep them so they won't come apart, or do they get fixed when you put them down? Or
no, they don't get fixed. They're totally flexible until I decide to glue them down or do something with them.
okay, so you glue them down.
Traditionally I have, but the more I do it, the more I think, how does this puzzle work fit into the other kind of work that I do, which is performance work? And my performance has always been about the unfinished, about the process of making things, and I try to demonstrate artistic process to the general viewer. And I think one of the ways that they could understand the visual art process would be with some materials that they're comfortable with, like a jigsaw puzzle or a paint by numbers or a board game or something like that. So my visual art has frequently centered around artwork made by playing games of bingo or board games or games that I devise, not a competitive games, but creative games where you take something that's the same, that you're comfortable with, that everybody knows something about, and you demonstrate to people that this can be used in a creative rather than a dead-ended kind of way. People think jigsaw puzzles are a waste of time. I knew of someone who had a father who was a socialist, and he hated jigsaw puzzles because he saw it as meaningless work made to entertain the bourgeoisie. And so when the kids would get a jigsaw puzzle, he would take a piece and eat it just So, so they would never have that satisfaction of completing it, because in his opinion, work was never ending. And this was just an amusement of what work is like, that you're going to come to some great conclusion. He wanted to establish that we were all wage slaves and labor slaves. Anyway, he wanted to put this message to his children, and he took jigsaws as a form of delivering that message.
So what
anyway,
is
that's
it? Are these the one that you showed me that are under your arms then?
Oh yes, these are the ones I'm just showing them. And that's
Yeah.
where I kind of stand up. Well, of course, I have to keep up my stamina. I have to do my exercises and so forth, and finger exercise in order to constantly be bent over the table. I have to do cat-cow yoga and other things like that. But that's how I work, down on the table, and I lay them beside. Also, I tend to work jigsaw puzzles when I know they have the same stamp and different pictures. I work them on top of each other, and that way I can see how the one image interfaces with the other would mix. And it's like good tea. It takes a certain while for those ideas to steep, for those ideas to bubble up, and and color the tea, and make and make the idea. Sometimes it's a pun, like one of my. Can I share the screen a minute? I'll show you something.
Sure, sure.
Can you will share screen?
If you can, you can.
It says that it's disabled. I don't need to use it, but I can. But anyway, well, you've enabled screen sharing. Whoops. Okay. Okay, well, that's your screen. You're sharing your screen.
Know.
Let me share my screen.
Right. I just enabled it. So
yes, well, you take your image off the screen, because you're sharing your screen right now. I'm not sharing mine.
I might have caused more problems than I meant to. Let's see.
Just stop this. Just go where to it says stop screen share.
I know, but it's so it minimized, so I can't see anything. Let's see.
Go up to the corner where it says, on the right hand corner where it says view. Go to see do full screen down at the bottom of that little pull down menu.
That's where it's not saying that. I already tried that. Let me try up here.
Okay, listen, I'm perfectly aware of the complexities of using Zoom as an art form. It's for all during COVID, I did Zoom calls with 144 artists from all over the world. And so if that menu at the top of the screen is invisible because it's being moved down, you can move that top of the screen, do exit full screen, so that you start to be able to manipulate that page. Do exit full screen for a second.
Okay.
That's a pull down from the top. Yep.
No, it's done something. Make co-host. Yes. All right, your co-host now. You try it on your side.
Well, okay. Yes, okay. Now I'm gonna go here. All right, so now I'm going to go show you a photo. That's the picture I think you were talking about. That you were looking at.
That was the one I was talking about.
Okay, and I'll tell you how I made it. So I had two puzzles. One was of this paint by number of palm trees, but notice there's a line that goes down the middle of that.
Mhm.
I took that part. I took a group of pieces that went down the center of that picture, and I moved them. I moved them from here where they would normally be from this side. I moved them to over here, and of this one was a horizontal picture of surf with the sky over here. And I took that sky from the horizontal picture and I moved it to the vertical picture. And I knitted those two together like that.
In a
along
way,
that
that
row.
sky looks like surf, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It is surf on this side, but the clouds also sort of look like surf over
Mhm.
here. And then there's something strange that happens here at the bottom of the picture. Look how that squared off area down there kind of looks like a postcard, almost like the palm trees are coming out of a postcard of the view of Valley High or wherever that tropical view is. And here, this kind of looks, instead of like a surf, it looks like a waterfall on this side. And this, there's a kind of figure here with a nose and a mouth and an eye, that seems to be
I
in
don't see
profile.
figures. I see rocks and
Yeah.
beaches, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't see
Well,
figures. And
yeah.
maybe somebody's swimming in
Can
the
you see my
water.
little, can you see my little virtual hand there pointing to things?
Yes.
Well, see here, I see a kind of face here in this area. I see a
Mhm.
nose and a mouth and an eye in that
I see. I see.
area.
Now that you show it to me.
In profile, yes, it's some imaginary god made out of rocks or something like that. And then this picture down here looks like a postcard where these palm trees are coming out of that postcard, and this looks like the background back here, but here this looks like the foreground, and like the palm trees are, it gives some depth to them. Anyway, I play around with the things until I no longer can see two separate puzzles. I only see one picture. And that new picture is what I'm looking for. I'm going to take that off right now and add myself back to come back to you. Okay.
Okay, that's fascinating, actually. I mean, I love the layering because that's how I
Yes.
work. So, of course, that appeals to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is it a lot of work, actually? A lot of time, or are you so good at it now that you can put the pieces together easily?
Well, I'll tell you where most of the time is. Most of the time is spent trying to find puzzles that match, which is very hard to do. The puzzles I like to use, other than these 4-point puzzles, which just went out of business, I used to love a company called Springbok. Most of those pictures back on the wall there are from Springbok, which was bought out by Hallmark in about 1970, something like that, so 71. And before Hallmark bought it, they mainly used art for their subject matters. Because after Spilsbury made his puzzles for children, educational toys for children to teach them geography, they decided, how are we going to make puzzles for adults? And the answer was art appreciation. So if they would spend time putting a puzzle together, they would spend more time with that artwork than they might spend in a museum. And the idea was this would create a cultivated audience for looking at pictures. And so art appreciation was the second form of puzzles after educational toys for children. And in the late 60s, Springbok was still making puzzles out of paintings from museums. They still make puzzles from museums, but the problem is pictorial images from museums have whole kinds of messy copyright issues from them. So most companies steer away from making puzzles with famous paintings in them unless that painting is out of copyright or something like that. So anyway, yeah, finding the puzzles that mix. So what I've had to do during COVID, I've started designing my own puzzles. Remember,
Ah,
remember, puzzles have, when you're working a puzzle, you have two kinds of information, right? You have the shape of the piece and the shape of the information on the piece. So it's the surface and the substrata, which is a shaped puzzle piece. And this is what fascinates me. When you ask what fascinates me about jigsaw puzzles, it's like the two halves of the brain working in tandem. One half is working with the shape of the piece, and one half is working with the shape of the information on the piece. And you can, if you have less information on either one of those sides of the brain, like for instance, if the puzzle was all red, then you wouldn't have any information on the piece to work with. You just have to work with the shape of the piece. If all the pieces were identically shaped, like that common shape with two males opposite two females, which I call the saddle shape, if all the pieces look exactly the same, then you focus your attention on what information is on the piece. That is the picture in a picture puzzle. So it's just, to me, it's like it's like more than just about, it's about two things: memory and imagination, creativity and problem solving, and then this other thing about the two halves of the brain. One half dealing kind of abstractly with the shape of the piece, and one dealing pretty narratively on the information that's contained on the piece. So to me, that's the fascination. Those two, combining those two perspectives on an activity or a process.
so let's go back to that. You're making your
Okay.
own puzzles. Who is cutting them
Yeah.
or stamping them for you?
Well, that's the problem. Somebody gave me a puzzle stamp once. I guess I don't have it right here. Well, here it is. Hold on just a second. Crash, crash. So this is a puzzle. This is a puzzle stamp. I'm going to go to my overhead camera. I'll show you what the puzzle stamp looks like. So here it is. So this is a thinktive puzzle. It started out as a piece of wood. Somebody drilled a hole here, and then they put a saw blade in that hole, and they cut these lines, and they cut these pieces one at a time until they were all put together. Then they took, you see, there's kind of metal, replace that saw blade. That metal is it's like this. It's like a ruler that's been inserted in the path that the saw took out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in order to hold it in place, sometimes they've used what they call shims to kind of, keep the pieces all the same distance apart. This black material is rubber. That's rubber. And what does you think that's for?
I have no idea, Mel.
Well, when they stamp the puzzle, they put a lot of pressure on this, and the cookie cutter goes through the cardboard and cuts the puzzle.
Oh, I see.
And when they do, the rubber compresses, and as they put that pressure on, and then when they take the pressure off, the rubber expands and it kicks the pieces out of the puzzle, out of the stamp, so they don't get caught in the cookie cutter. You understand? That rubber
It's a little
expands.
complicated for me.
Oh,
It's a complicated but looks like simple process at the
It is a
same
simple
time.
process. It is a kind of ingenious but simple process.
So you would take the cardboard or whatever that you
Yep.
use, you would do your drawing or painting on it, then you would use that cutter and press down.
Yeah, I tried to do that. I tried
Oh,
to
you
do
had.
that. But in order to make this work, you have to have a press that has thousands of pounds of pressure to cut through that cardboard. And my father ran a factory, and I took them to my father and I had him stamp out some pictures, but he almost broke his machines trying to find enough way to put enough pressure on there to cut through the cardboard. So you have to have a very industrial kind of machines in order to cut jigsaw puzzles. And I didn't have access to that. I made some out of paint by numbers. And that's why I like making this series out of paint by numbers too. But I made some, and then I just said, I give up. I can't find a way to cut my own puzzles, and it's too expensive because the manufacturers don't want to do a run of 200 puzzles. They want to do 10,000 puzzles, all of the same picture, put them in boxes and ship them back to you for
What
retailing.
about the people who went out of business? They've still got to have their equipment.
No, that company probably was, that company that went out of business was sending them to China, where they have generic stamps that stamp anything they put underneath it. So that company probably didn't have the real manufacturing process. It just had the design and marketing and licensing aspects of a puzzle company, and they took the manufacturing offshore. So I didn't have the ability to go to China with asking them to do a run of 200 puzzles. So then I learned that some of the craftsmen, and I didn't have the time or energy to cut them all by hand with a little saw and make them so precise that I could mix the pieces. Then lasers came up. And so I found that you could make a vector path drawing. You could give it to a computer guy, and he could hook it up to a laser cutter, and the laser cutter could cut exactly precise pieces. So I made a bunch of those. And here's what I had. After I worked all my puzzle collages, I had a lot of box tops left. You know, that's just the back, but it's ready to be made into a puzzle because it's a good quality picture on a cardboard backing, and I could put them under the laser and they could cut them, and then I could make puzzles like this one. Yeah, I guess I have to show you by going to this other camera again, but let's just look at it. Okay, so this is a picture that mixes a picture of the Pietà with this forest, as if she's cradling the environment, right? Get the picture? And these are laser cut pieces from box tops. That's how I could make my own puzzles.
Okay, so you have a laser or what?
I don't. That's the problem.
How
That's
about
the
a
problem.
3D printer?
Oh, a 3D printer? Yeah, 3D printers, they don't cut. They don't cut. They just deal with the surface. That you could use you could use them to cut. You could use them to create pieces, but I don't think. No, it's not. It's not the ideal thing. They're best for three-dimensional things, not two-dimensional things.
So where do you go to get this?
Okay. It's been circuitous. I'm talking to about how all the mistakes I made, but I found that there are places that will laser cut them for you in short batches. You can even go to the public library. It may have a laser printer, a laser cutter that would, that could cut them. And there are people who have laser cutter. A good one costs $3,000 to $6,000 or something like that. So it's a pretty big investment. I didn't want to really invest in it. And then you have the time that it takes to cut them and so forth. Actually, these days, they not only cut with lasers, they cut with high pressure water, a stream of water that is so small, it's smaller than the width of the saw blade, and it's so direct and hard that it can cut through plywood and cut the pieces according to a computer path drawing and make them all interchangeable. So there are ways to do it, but again, that equipment is again very expensive. But here's the deal. I learned from trying to find manufacturers, find materials. There's something in art called found art, where you use materials from popular culture or something like that, like pop art, where you find your materials rather than paint them or cut them and paste them and collage them with something. A lot of people, when they look at my puzzles, they think, oh, that's such an interesting puzzle of a strange picture. It's not an interesting puzzle of a strange picture. It's a strange picture created from jigsaw puzzles. I don't cut them with the scissors. I don't paint on them to erase the picture that was supposed to be on there. I'm just using found materials, but I'm having a hard time finding materials. So these days, the other problem was, if I use other people's materials, like their pictures, then I got to deal with licensing. So if I want to choose both my, I want to design both halves of what you need to make a jigsaw puzzle. I want to design the cut of the jigsaw puzzle that creates the shapes, and I have to have a cut that nobody else has that I can patent or make a copyright on, which I came up with a circular puzzle. Okay, here's an example of a puzzle that I designed aside from the laser cut one, which I had made. This is a picture of a glass of soda, some pop in a just fizzy water inside of a glass, looking down on a glass. But I made a design that's in rings. And so that's the problem. I don't have to find a puzzle that matches this one because I can move the rings on this puzzle. I can move the rings in this puzzle around. See that?
This is quite beautiful.
See what I can get out of that puzzle is kind of concave, convex. It's almost like a floating globe in the middle of of that thing. So I didn't take this picture, but if I took my own picture, I used my own picture, and I used my own cut, then I could make a product that was. Then I could make a product that was mine. Our world is messed up. The fact that we can't use popular culture in our art is a problem. We are inundated by popular culture, by music, by things, and it's all because of capitalism. It's all, we're not allowed to use it. I understand unique creativity and coming up with things. It's the American way. But I also think we ought to be able to use the materials of our culture. They're our environment. It's like telling a fish he has to invent water.
There is something called transformative use that artists have very much. I can send you.
No. I know about Creative Commons licensing and various other things that where I can make my artwork copyright free. I can make it so that anybody can use it unless they put their name on it. Right, but they can, as long as they credit me. That's called Creative Commons licensing. There are ways around some of that, but most of the things around us do not have that. Mickey Mouse is is always under copyright.
Copyright, right.
Yeah.
But there are other things that aren't. You don't
Yes.
have to use, I mean, just the
But why
round
shouldn't you be able
circular.
to use the thing that why shouldn't you be able to use the thing back on itself? Why can't you use Mickey Mouse to comment on popular culture? Well, you can, and that's where you were talking
The
about
Santos is doing
transformative
it,
use. Transformative use. I understand that.
right. And that piece, that red piece that you made of the bubbles in the glass or whatever they are, bubbles in a glass of cola or whatever it is,
Yes.
that's perfectly acceptable. I mean, isn't that what, isn't that your creation in a way?
Yes. 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 That's what I have to do. I figure out a way to choose imagery and the shape of the piece. I have to have my proprietary, if I have to become this. I got accomplice to the whole copyright issue. I have to choose. I have to copyright something that only I can use.
You know, I have a friend who lives in Iowa City in Ecumenical Towers, where there are a lot of people, older people.
Yeah.
And one of the things she says, she's a poet, and she writes poetry and tries to publish, and she's working on a memoir about taking care of her parents and all this. That what the point is, she always says to me, you know, I'm so glad I have this because there are people, she's 80. She says there are people here that don't have that particular interest or don't have things that they can create and things that they can um, that enrich their lives, you know.
Yes.
They just live from day to day until they die, and of course somebody's always dying here. But she says she she points out, you know, that she makes the that her life is enriched by. I was thinking of that when you were talking. I was thinking, you know, you're almost 80 years old, but this stuff can keep you going till however long
Yes.
it can keep you going. And it's very, like, very enriching and very thought provoking. And, you know, do you
Well,
see what
I'm
I'm
glad you
trying
see
to
that. I'm
say?
glad you see that. If I didn't have something like this, if I didn't have a creative focus, I could easily just be only concerned with my daily routines and chores and obligations and things. I have a curiosity. Evidently, I had it when I was 10 years old. And it's not a question of how does a person become an artist? It is, when do they stop being an artist?
Exactly.
When do they let go of a creative component in their life? And as a result, turn themselves into a slave of their habits. I'm not a slave of my habits.
Well, you've got so much work ahead of you to do that I see it as you're, you know, doing it until one day they find Mel with his head down on his puzzle and he's
When
gone.
they lifted his head, they found he was dead. It's a
Yes.
picture from life's other side. Yes, I know.
But I think that's fascinating. I also think it speaks to something. Now, you brought up the fact that you're 80 years old, and look, you're starting a whole new thing for yourself
Yeah,
and for other people.
I know. And sometimes I think, why did you wait till you were 80 to be an entrepreneur? To come up with ideas that actually have a kind of commercial application. And I'm not really going to be able to capitalize on these particular things. So I'm just yeah, it's a business, but it's a business just for the sake of kind of keeping me alive and interested in and creative. So they say artists never retire, and
Exactly.
yeah. And you, what are you doing these days?
Well, if you go to the page, my YouTube page where I will put this video, I during COVID, okay, I started watching YouTube, and I started watching women artists or people. They started making things called junk journals.
Called what?
Junk journals. Junk journals. As in junk
Junk
journals and altered
journals.
books.
Junk journals.
And altered books. And I became interested in them. So I started interviewing them. I started pursuing them. I started watching their work. And I came across, I have almost a master's in communication, which I got after my son left home and was all grown up. And I actually did not finish my degree. All I had to do was write a paper, and I never did it. And I never did it because I thought one more MA in journalism is not what I need. So this is part of the process, is part of the journalistic side of my last degree. But I started making, I had a lot of postcards left over from my show in New York, which was years ago. And I started using them to make collages and things. And I invested in stuff from these, I learned things from these ladies. So,
Well, I was going to show you. I was going to show you something, but I have a huge collection of old postcards from my Aunt Belva, and I found a way to make 3-piece puzzles out of a postcard and then make collages of them. Here's an
well, do
example.
show.
This is an example of one. I'm going to show it to you on the overhead screen. But I like the idea that we've somehow stumbled on a similar thing. You see, this is a collage made out of postcards, art postcards of different pictures, and mixing them together by cutting them into 3 simple pieces that I could cut with a scissors rather than a laser or a or something else. So I think we're on the same wavelength. We're maybe it's a factor of our shared experience over all these many years, whether or not we were aware of what each other were doing. There was a kind of mental connection that.
Well, it's interesting because this. So I learned about stickers, and I learned about these ladies use stickers and all kinds of paraphernalia. Washi tape, and it's all new.
Can I make a suggestion? There's something called a cricket. Do you know what a cricket is?
I have one. I just bought one off of.
And did you use it to cut your jigsaw, your
No,
postcards into collage pieces?
Taken it out of a box yet.
Well, I think it's the tool. I would like to have one of those tools. I know they're about $400 if you buy the top of the line, something like that.
The top of the line, yes, but an older cricket, those green things, go on eBay and look at them. I made this offer to this guy. He had lots of parts and stuff for $50. And I got the cricket. It's a hand roll thing. The other thing you can use is a pasta maker. You can actually take a pasta maker and put things through the pasta maker.
Oh yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that on a YouTube video about using a kind of pasta shredder
Right.
to create collage materials. Yes, I think these we as artists are using these objects as like toys in the simplest way, way as possible, just like using cookie cutters instead of puzzle stamps. We're just and the scissors or whatever. We refuse to get sucked into the obligation to use this on the most sophisticated level. We try to say, yeah, let's put it in my own hands, okay? Let me not have to ship this off to some guy to cut it for me.
Let
me
me
see what
ask
I
you
can do.
something. I bought a laminating machine.
A what mean?
A
laminating machine?
laminating machine.
Yep.
Because I couldn't have an intaglio press. And one of the questions I asked them was, can I use this as an intaglio press? And they said yes, because it lifts and shrinks down to fit to a plate. And then the librarian who does conservation or whatever said, why not a spoon? So basically, you could etch out your design and use a spoon
Oh yeah,
to make an image.
to burnish the image to the
exactly. But I find the intaglio machine, which was $130, and I bought a really big one. I don't know where to put it. It's about this big, and it's about 32 inches. You know, it's a yard.
yeah.
And basically it's it was $134. And I am thinking, and like the Cuttlebug that I bought, the cutting embossing machine that you're talking about,
The Cricut, yeah.
and yeah, that
And you can cut
oh,
things that have an adhesive back on it, so that you can take those pieces and collage them together, portions of it.
but I guess the point is the same as you. I learned from these ladies, and I'm making things that aren't influenced in a way by their work, but are incorporated into mine. And I find it fun. You know, I find it new and fun and kind of, what can I
Can it
say?
be? Can it be that we grew up in the era of do it yourself?
It could be.
I think that's one of the factors that we had popular things like paint by numbers. You could learn how to paint by kind of following a pattern or coloring books or different things like that. And we got from that, well, you could kind of use that as a stepping stone to doing it yourself. You could take the kit and you could turn the kit inside out and you could make something of it. I just bought some paint by numbers recently, 2 paintings by Van Gogh, one horizontal and one vertical, and I'm going to somehow cut those rings in them, maybe using the laser cutter, maybe just using the Cricut. And I'm going to cut the paintings when I finish them, and then I can turn them around like I did with that can of, or that glass of soda water, and see if I can't make things out of those, out of collages out of those paintings as well.
Well, we will have to continue this conversation.
Okay. But next time you have to get some kind of a camera so that you can hold up things to me that I can.
You know what's odd is I don't know. I have an attachment.
This little thing that I'm holding in my hand here is a camera that fits on top of your TV, and you can use it to look at things on the any direction. You just hold it, turn it around and see different things and so forth. That costs less than $100, maybe $70 or something like that. Anyway, the
And
idea that you could, it's just a little camera. It's called a Logitech, camera, and you just plug it into a USB and use it in Zoom. And down there where it says the video, suddenly this second camera appears and you can switch between them.
Oh, all right. Well, maybe you can send me by email the information about it.
Well, maybe you can come up at some point. I know you take your grandson to a soccer game. You can maybe someday take the car up here and visit my studio, and I'll show you this whole setup and how to do
I
it.
would love to do that, Mel. Thank you for the invitation.
Okay. Well, listen, anybody who is interested can get in touch with me by sending me an email, mel.andringa, ANDRINGA, @gmail.com, or they can go to Facebook where I have a Mel Andringa Facebook page, but I also have a page called Puzzle Pictures by Mel Andringa, which covers whatever I'm working on. I just posted on there in addition to my Facebook page.
So is that a Facebook page or?
Yep, it's a
Puzzle
Facebook page.
Picture?
Puzzle Pictures by Mel Andringa.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And you can go to annadora-arts.com to see what lately I've been working on.
Fabulous.
It was absolutely
We're networked. We're networked.
We are. All right, Mel.
Thanks so
Have
much
a
for
good
inviting
rest of
me.
your day. And when spring comes, expect me to visit and I will let you know. But we need to talk about what we ended up now and see
Okay.
what we can do
All right.
with that. All right. Bye.
I'm going to leave. Bye-bye.